Life sometimes forces people into impossible choices, ones that linger like shadows, no matter how many years pass. On a cold, rainy night in a quiet town, a young woman stood shivering on the steps of a church. In her arms, wrapped in a thin blanket, was her newborn baby. She pressed her lips against his tiny forehead, whispering a prayer through her tears. She begged God to send someone kind, someone better than she could ever be, to raise him. With trembling hands, she laid the child on the church doorstep, rang the heavy iron bell, and fled into the darkness. That was the last time she saw him, at least. That's what she thought. The baby's cries were soon answered. Father Thomas, the parish priest, opened the great oak doors and found him. In that moment, the child's fate changed. It would grow up, never knowing the face of the woman who bore him, only the story of how he was found under the watchful gaze of faith. The boy was later adopted by a loving family who gave him a name, a home, and a future. Outwardly, he thrived. But deep inside, a question gnawed at him. Who am I? Where did I truly come from? That question followed him into adulthood, silent but ever present. A shadow in moments of quiet reflection. Years later, tragedy struck. After a sudden accident, the boy, now a man, found himself in a hospital bed, clinging to life. Day after day, a nurse cared for him. She was gentle yet strong, with eyes that carried an inexplicable sadness. Her presence brought him comfort. He couldn't explain, a strange familiarity that stirred emotions he couldn't name. Neither knew the truth that bound them. Neither realized that fate had set the stage for a reunion decades in the making. The nurse was not a stranger. She was the very woman who had left him all those years ago, carrying a secret she had buried deep in her heart. Soon, the moment of revelation would come, and with it, the chance for both mother and son to face a past that never truly let them go. The night she left her baby haunted her for decades. She was only 19 at the time, barely more than a child herself. Her family had cast her out when her pregnancy became known, branding her a disgrace. The baby's father had vanished long before, leaving her with nothing but shame and fear. With no money, no shelter, and no support, she carried the weight of desperation. In her heart, she convinced herself that leaving him at a church was not abandonment, but salvation. Within those walls, perhaps someone would find him. Someone capable of giving him the life she never could. That night, rain poured relentlessly, soaking through her thin coat as she cradled the tiny boy against her chest. His small fingers curled around her thumb, and the warmth of his fragile body pressed against her skin like a plea not to let go. She memorized his face, the softness of his cheeks, the faint whimper that escaped his lips, the innocent life that depended on her. She whispered through sobs, "I'm so sorry. Forgive me. One day you'll understand." Her words dissolved into the storm as church bells tolled midnight. It was time. With trembling hands, she set him down, wrapped him tighter in the blanket, and rang the heavy bell to summon help before she ran into the night. Her heart shattered with every step she took away. Inside the church, Father Thomas opened the door and froze when he saw the bundle. He knelt, lifted the infant gently, and rocked him against his chest. "You are safe now," he whispered. That night marked the beginning of a new story for the child. The authorities were called, and after a short stay in foster care, the baby was placed with a couple who had prayed for years for a child. They named him Michael. Michael grew up surrounded by love. His adoptive parents cherished him, nurtured him, and treated him as their miracle. He had toys, bedtime stories, birthday parties, and all the affection a child could want. Yet even in such warmth, a shadow lingered. He learned early on that he had been found on church steps, left by a woman whose name no one knew. At first, it seemed like just a detail story about where he came from. But as the years passed, that truth began to fester inside him. Every birthday, Michael felt the same quiet ache. Somewhere out there was a woman who had chosen to walk away from him. His adoptive mother always reassured him, Love is not blood, Michael. Love is choice. We chose you." He nodded and smiled, grateful. But deep down, another thought haunted him. Why didn't she choose me? Michael became a kind, intelligent young man, well-liked by teachers and friends, but the question of his origin never left. It lived in the back of his mind, surfacing in the quiet of the night or in the hollow of loneliness. He didn't know it yet, but fate was already writing the next chapter, one that would force him to confront the woman who had once left him, and discover that love and regret can be two sides of the same coin. Michael's life unfolded in a way that seemed almost ordinary from the outside. He went to school, played sports, made friends, and excelled in his studies. Yet beneath the surface, there was always a longing he could never explain. When his classmates spoke of family traditions or grandparents' stories, Michael felt a pang of emptiness. He could never share tales of bloodlines or inherited traits. Instead, his identity was stitched together from fragments, half-whispered stories about the night he was found, the kindness of strangers, and the devotion of his adoptive parents. By the time he reached his 20s, Michael had built a life marked by discipline and compassion. He studied engineering, volunteered at community centers, and carried himself with quiet determination. But inside, he wrestled with unspoken doubts. He often wondered if somewhere in another corner of the world there was someone who looked like him, someone who thought of him, someone who regretted letting him go. He never knew that across town, the woman who had once left him on the church steps was living a life equally haunted by the past. Her name was Anna. After the night of abandonment, she had tried to rebuild herself from the ground up. She worked odd jobs, eventually trained to become a nurse, and dedicated her life to helping others. But no matter how many lives she touched, she could never escape the memory of the child she had lost. Every time she held a newborn in her arms, she thought of the one she had left behind. Every patient's gratitude reminded her of the love she had given up. Anna kept her secret buried deep. No one in her circle knew about the baby she once had. To them, she was simply a devoted caregiver with a quiet sadness in her eyes. At night, when the world grew silent, she would whisper the same words she had spoken decades earlier. "I'm sorry, forgive me." She had no idea that the child she mourned was living just a few miles away, growing into a man who carried her features. Without knowing it, fate waited patiently. And then, one ordinary day, everything shifted. Michael was driving home from work when a speeding truck ran a red light. The impact was devastating. Metal crumpled, glass shattered, and in an instant, Michael's world went black. He was rushed to the hospital unconscious, his life hanging by a thread. When he opened his eyes days later, he was surrounded by white walls, beeping monitors, and the dull ache of broken bones. Nurses came and went, but one lingered more than the others. She had kind eyes, lined with years of unspoken sorrow, and a voice that calmed him even when the pain was unbearable. She introduced herself simply as Anna. Michael felt an inexplicable connection to her. Her touch was gentle, almost familiar, as if he had known it before. Her gaze lingered on him longer than necessary, as though she saw something more than just a patient. He didn't understand it, but in her presence, he felt a strange sense of safety, as if he belonged. Anna, meanwhile, felt the same shock of recognition. Something about his face, his eyes, struck her like a memory she had tried to bury. She pushed the thought aside, telling herself it was only imagination. But as the days turned into weeks, and she cared for him through his recovery, the resemblance grew impossible to ignore. Neither of them knew yet, but the bond of blood was already whispering its truth. The mother who had once left her son at a church doorstep was now the nurse who sat at his bedside, torn between the duty of her profession and the guilt of her past. Destiny had brought them together again, but the question loomed: would the truth heal them more, destroy them both? Michael's days in the hospital stretched on, each one blurring into the next. His body was weak, riddled with fractures and stitched wounds, but his spirit clung to hope. Through it all, Anna was there, steady, attentive, and quietly present in ways that words couldn't capture. She adjusted his pillows when the pain was sharpest, whispered encouragement when despair threatened to swallow him, and sat silently when silence was what he needed most. She wasn't just a nurse, she was something more, though neither of them could name it yet. Michael often found himself studying her face. There was a depth in her eyes that unsettled him, like a mirror reflecting a pain he himself carried. One evening, as the golden light of sunset filtered through the hospital, "Blinds?" he asked softly. "Do I remind you of someone?" Anna froze, the glass of water in her hand trembling slightly. She forced a small smile. "You remind me of many patients I've cared for. Everyone has a story." But her heart hammered inside her chest. He did remind her of someone, of the baby she once kissed goodbye on a rainy night decades ago. As the weeks passed, Michael shared more of his story. He told her about his adoptive parents, about how grateful he was for their love, and yet how he always carried the ache of not knowing his origins. Anna listened intently, her heart aching with every word. Each detail he revealed was like a knife twisting deeper confirmation that the boy she abandoned had grown into the man lying before her. At night she went home and cried. She wanted to tell him the truth, but fear paralyzed her. What if he rejected her? What if he hated her for what she had done? For years, she had buried the guilt, convincing herself it was for the best. But now, confronted with the living proof of her choice, the guilt was unbearable. Meanwhile, Michael's feelings toward Anna grew complicated. He felt safe around her, drawn to her warmth in a way he couldn't explain. Her presence calmed the storm inside him, and sometimes when their eyes met, it felt as though words weren't needed. He dreamed about her not romantically, but with a sense of belonging he had never known. It confused him, unsettled him, yet he couldn't deny it. One afternoon, while Anna changed his for, Michael asked again. More directly this time, "Anna, why do you look at me the way you do? Like you've known me forever." Her hands stilled, her breath caught. She met his gaze, and for a moment, the walls she had built crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly looked away. "Sometimes," she whispered, "life shows us people who touch something deep inside us. That's all." She hurried through her tasks and left the room before her composure broke completely. Michael watched her go, troubled and restless. That night, he lay awake, replaying every interaction. The way her hand lingered on his arm, the softness in her voice when she said his name, the sorrow in her eyes. Something about it all gnawed at him, pulling him toward a truth he couldn't quite grasp. For Anna, the pressure became unbearable. Each day she cared for him, the urge to confess grew stronger. She began writing letters at night, pouring out the truth onto paper, but tearing them up before morning. She told herself she had no right to disrupt his life. He had parents who loved him, who raised him. He didn't need her. And yet, every time she heard him call her name, she felt the weight of her silence crushing her chest. Then came the night that changed everything. Michael had suffered a sudden complication. His breathing faltered. Alarms rang and doctors rushed. Inanna was among them, her hands steady even as panic surged through her veins. She stayed by his side through the chaos, whispering, "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." When at last his condition stabilized and the danger passed, she remained at his bedside long after the others left. Her tears fell freely now, dripping onto the sheets as she held his hand. In that moment, watching the rise and fall of his chest, she realized she couldn't carry the secret any longer. Whether it healed them or shattered everything, the truth had to be spoken. Her son, her Michael, was lying before her. And it was time he finally knew who she was. The next morning, Anna entered Michael's room with her heart pounding harder than ever before. She carried a tray of breakfast, but her hands trembled as she set it down. Michael noticed immediately. "You look pale," he said softly. "Are you okay?" She hesitated, gripping the back of the chair for support. Now, she told herself. It has to be now. Michael, she whispered, sitting down beside him. There's something I've carried for a very long time. Something you deserve to know. He frowned, curiosity and unease mixing on his face. What is it? Her throat tightened, and for a moment, fear nearly silenced her. But then she saw the bandages covering his broken body. The fragility of his life, and she knew the truth couldn't stay buried any longer. With trembling hands, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small worn locket. She opened it, revealing a faded picture of a newborn baby swaddled in a blanket. This, she said, her voice breaking, was you. Michael stared at the photo, confusion flashing across his features. Me? How do you have this? Anna's tears spilled over. Because I am your mother. The silence that followed was heavier than anything either of them had ever endured. Michael's world tilted, spinning in disbelief. He shook his head, trying to grasp her words. No, that's not possible. Mother, she left me. She abandoned me on church steps. I know, Anna sobbed. I was that woman. I was 19. I'd know. 1. My family turned me out. The father was gone, and I was terrified. I thought leaving you at the church was the only way to save you. I never stopped thinking about you, not for a single day. I became a nurse because of you, because I wanted to give others the care I couldn't give my own son. Michael's chest tightened, his breath shallow. The truth slammed into him like a tidal wave, flooding him with rage, sorrow, and something deeper, confusion. All these years, he whispered hoarsely, all these years I wondered who she was. And it was you, the woman standing by my bed, all this. Anna reached for his hand, but he pulled it back, his face twisting in pain. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up knowing your own mother didn't want you? Her heart shattered, but she didn't flinch from his anger. I wanted you, Michael, more than anything. But I was weak. I failed you. And I will carry that failure for the rest of my life. But if I could trade places with you right now, if I could take your pain, your scars, I would. 'Cause you are my son, and I love you. The words hung in the air, raw and desperate. Michael turned his face toward the window, silent tears streaking his cheeks. He couldn't look at her, not yet. But something inside him shifted. Beneath the storm of betrayal, there was a spark of recognition, a bond he couldn't deny. For the rest of the day, neither spoke of it again. Anna stayed by his side, quietly tending to him, while Michael drifted in and out of restless sleep. The revelation had torn open wounds for both of them, but it had also uncovered something neither had expected: the possibility of healing. The road ahead would be painful, uncertain, and filled with questions. But for the first time, mother and son were no longer strangers bound by silence. They were two broken souls, facing the truth together, and that, in itself, was a beginning. The days after Anna's confession felt like walking through fog. Michael drifted between silence and sudden bursts of emotion, while Anna lingered close by, always careful not to push too hard. The hospital room became their battlefield, words turning into weapons, pauses cutting deeper than arguments. One afternoon, as the afternoon sun painted pale stripes across the sterile walls, Michael finally spoke. His voice was steady but sharp. Why now? Why wait until I'm lying in this bed, broken, to tell me? Why not just leave me in peace? Anna gripped the chair beside him, her knuckles white. 'Cause I couldn't lie anymore. When I saw your name on the patient chart, it felt like the world stopped. I knew it was you, my son, and for the first time in decades, I had the chance to tell you the truth. I couldn't waste it. His jaw tightened. Do you know what it was like growing up with that hole inside me? Always wondering if I wasn't enough for you? Anna's eyes filled with tears. You were always enough. I wasn't. I was 19, scared, and thrown away by everyone I thought would protect me. I told myself leaving you at the church was the only way you'd survive. It was wrong, but it wasn't because you weren't wanted. Michael turned his face toward the window, blinking hard. Her words dug into him, colliding with years of unanswered questions. He wanted to hate her, to cling to the anger that shielded him from disappointment. But her trembling voice, her raw honesty, made it impossible to dismiss her completely. "You don't get to fix this with apologies," he said. "You don't get to show up and call yourself my mother." Anna nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know, I can't erase the past. I can't ask you to call me anything. But I can answer your questions. I can sit here and give you the truth. You've carried in silence for too long." The challenge in his eyes softened into something else, hesitation, maybe curiosity. After a long pause, he asked quietly, "Did you ever hold me? Even once?" Anna's face broke into silent sobs. "I held you all night before I let you go. I memorized your face, the curl of your fingers, the sound of your breath. I kissed you until I couldn't anymore. Leaving you wasn't because I didn't want you. It was because I thought someone else could give you a life." I see OULDN single quotes T. Silence followed, heavy and raw. For the first time, Michael didn't see just the nurse or the woman who had abandoned him. He saw someone broken by her own choices, carrying scars invisible to the world. That night marked a shift. Their conversations became a kind of ritual. Each day, Michael asked something about his birth, about the man who had fathered him, about what her life had been like since. And each day, Anna answered with unwavering honesty. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she smiled through the memories, but she never hid. Healing didn't come smoothly. There were moments when Michael lashed out, telling her to leave, slamming the door of silence between them. Yet Anna always returned, quietly sitting by his side, waiting for him to speak again. Her constancy began to wear down his walls. One evening, Michael woke in pain, struggling to breathe through the stabbing ache in his ribs. Anna rushed to him, pressing the call button with one hand while clutching his with the other. "I'm here," she whispered urgently, tears in her eyes. "I won't let go." In his haze, he gripped her hand tighter, realizing for the first time how much he wanted her there. Another morning, he stirred awake to the faint sound of her humming. The tune was soft, almost absent-minded, but he knew it instantly. Was the same lullaby Father Thomas used to sing to him when he was a child. He had never known where it came from, now. The realization hit him like a wave. She had sung it first. For the first time since her confession, Michael's anger eased. The ache was still there, sharp and deep, but a fragile thread had begun to form between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close, a chance. He wasn't ready to call her mom, but he no longer looked at her as only the woman who had abandoned him. She was also the woman who had found her way back. Michael's release from the hospital was bittersweet. The sterile white walls, the quiet hum of machines, and the constant presence of Anna had become an unlikely cocoon. Outside those walls, reality waited, messy, uncertain, and filled with questions he still wasn't ready to answer. Yet when the doctor signed his discharge papers, Michael knew it was time. Anna walked beside him, carrying his small bag. She didn't say much, afraid her words might push him away. Outside the hospital doors, the sunlight was blinding. Michael paused, inhaling deeply, as if he had just stepped into an entirely new world. "Do you want me to call a cab for you?" Anna asked softly. Michael shook his head. "No, Dad's coming to pick me up." The word dad stung her, not because she resented his adoptive father, but because it was a reminder of what she had missed. Still, she nodded and waited. When his foster father arrived, Michael hesitated before introducing Anna. "This is Anna. She was my nurse." "Just nurse, nothing more," Anna forced a smile, understanding the weight of that choice. In the weeks that followed, Michael tried to slip back into normal life. But normal no longer existed. Nights were the hardest. He would wake up thinking about Hertha, sound of her voice, the tears in her eyes, the years she had lost. He wanted to hate her, but hatred required energy he didn't have. More often, he just felt exhausted by the endless tug-of-war inside him. Anna, meanwhile, kept her distance but never disappeared. She sent short messages. "How are you feeling today? Did you manage to eat?" Sometimes Michael replied with a single word. Sometimes he ignored them. But the messages kept coming, steady as a heartbeat. One afternoon, while walking slowly around the park as part of his recovery routine, Michael saw Anna sitting on a bench nearby. She wasn't looking at him, just watching children play, her hands clasped tightly together. For a moment, he thought about walking away, but something stopped him. He sat down beside her. "You don't give up easily, do you?" he asked. Anna turned. To him, her eyes shimmering. "Not when it comes to you." The silence that followed was heavy, yet strangely comforting. Michael studied her face, the lines of age, the quiet strength. She looked nothing like the ghostly figure of regret he had imagined all his life. She was flesh and blood, human, flawed. His mother. Over the next few weeks, small cracks began to form in the wall he had built. Anna cooked meals and left them on his doorstep, sometimes with little notes. She accompanied him to physical therapy sessions when his foster parents were busy. When he lost his temper, snapping at her for hovering, she absorbed the sting without retaliation. Her presence was like water on stone, gentle, persistent, slowly reshaping the hardness of his heart. One evening, after a particularly difficult therapy session, Michael struggled to climb the steps to his house. Anna instinctively moved to support him. For the first time, he didn't pull away. "Thanks," he muttered. Breathless, she smiled faintly. Always. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a crack in the dam. The true turning point came a week later. Michael had been invited to a small dinner with friends. When it was time to leave, he looked at Anna, who had been quietly sitting in the kitchen waiting to see if he needed her. He surprised himself with the words that came out of his mouth. "Do you want to come with me?" Anna froze. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. Then tears welled in her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. It was a simple invitation, almost casual. But for both of them, it was monumental. It meant that, for the first time, Michael was choosing her not as a nurse, not as a stranger with regrets, but as someone who belonged in his life. The road ahead was still long, paved with conversations they hadn't had and wounds that hadn't healed. But in that moment, walking out the door together, Michael knew one thing with certainty. He was no longer alone in his story. The dinner was held at a modest restaurant on the edge of town. For Michael, it was his first social outing since leaving the hospital. He felt nervous, unsure how people would react to the presence of the woman who walked quietly beside him. Anna, too, felt the weight of every step, her heart pounding like a drum. She knew this wasn't just a dinner, it was Michael's way of testing if she belonged in his world. Inside, his friends greeted him warmly. They asked about his recovery, joked about how pale he looked, and made him laugh for the first time in weeks. Anna sat quietly at the corner of the table, offering small smiles when anyone acknowledged her. Michael didn't introduce her as his mother. Not yet. But he did. "Say this is Anna. She's important to me." The word hung in the air. Anna blinked back tears, cherishing it like a fragile jewel. Later that evening, after the laughter and food, Michael and Anna walked home together. The streets were quiet, lamps glowing in the misty night. For the first time in years, Michael felt like the silence between them wasn't heavy, it was full of possibility. But healing isn't linear. A few days later, Michael found himself spiraling again. He had gone through some of his old belongings, photos, documents. Mementos on stumbled upon a letter from his adoptive parents explaining how they had found him. The words reopened old wounds. He confronted Anna at her small apartment, unable to hold back. "You left me there like I was nothing," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "Do you know what it's like to grow up wondering why you weren't good enough? Spend your whole life thinking you were some kind of mistake? Anna's face went pale, but she didn't look away. "I think about it every single day," she whispered. "Not a morning passes when I don't regret what I did. But at 19, I was scared, abandoned, and broke. I thought leaving you at the church was giving you a chance I couldn't give. It wasn't that you weren't good enough fit, was that I wasn't." Her words struck him like a wave, forcing him to sit down, his anger colliding with a sudden rush of empathy. For the first time, he saw her not as the woman who had abandoned him, but as a frightened girl who had once been left with no choice. Michael buried his face in his hands. "I don't know how to forgive you." Anna knelt before him, tears falling freely. "You don't have to. Not yet. All I ask is a chance to be here now, to walk with you, no matter how long it takes." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Michael slowly reached out, placing his hand over hers. Wasn't forgiveness, but it was connection. Days turned into weeks. They started spending more time together, not as mother and son, but as two people learning how to rebuild something fragile. Anna cooked for him. Michael showed her his favorite books. They even laughed sometimes, though the shadow of the past lingered. The breakthrough came one quiet evening. They were sitting in Michael's living room, watching the rain tap against the window when he suddenly spoke. "I used to imagine what my mother looked like," he said softly. "I pictured her face 100 different ways. And now, sitting here, I realize none of it matters. You're here. That's enough." Anna's breath caught. She didn't dare move, afraid the moment would shatter. Then Michael looked directly at her and whispered, "Comma, Mom." It was a single word, but it carried the weight of decades. The dam finally broke. Anna cried openly, reaching for him. And this time he didn't pull away. For the first time, mother and son held each other not as strangers bound by regret, but as family broken, imperfect, but finally whole. Life rarely gives second chances, but when it does, they are often wrapped in pain, patience, and courage. For Michael and Anna, their second chance was not a neat reunion tied with a bow. It was messy, fragile, and filled with moments of doubt. Yet over time, those cracks became the very places where light entered, months after leaving the hospital. Michael had fully recovered physically. Emotionally, he was still on the journey, but the progress was undeniable. He and Anna now shared regular dinners. They went on long walks together, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation that peeled back layers of years they had lost. Slowly, the question that had haunted him, "Why did she leave me?" was no longer a wound but a doorway to understanding. His adoptive parents welcomed Anna cautiously at first, uncertain how this late chapter would unfold. But when they saw how much calmer and lighter Michael became in her presence, their hesitations softened. One evening, around the family table, Michael's adoptive mother placed her hand over Anna's and said gently, "We both love the same person." That's enough. It was not just an acceptance, it was a blessing. For Anna, these moments felt almost unreal. She had lived so long in the shadow of guilt that she never believed forgiveness was possible. Yet here she was, not only welcomed into Michael's life, but also given a chance to build a future with him. She took nothing for granted. Every smile from her son, every conversation, every shared memory in making was a miracle she treasured deeply. The real turning point came during Michael's birthday. Friends and family gathered in his home, filling the air with laughter and warmth. There was cake, candles, and music. Michael looked around the room, his heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the boy who had been left on the church steps. He felt like a man surrounded by love. When it came time to make a wish, Michael closed his eyes. Instead of wishing for answers or for the pain to disappear, he simply whispered in his heart, "Thank you." Later that night, when the guests had left and the house was quiet, Michael and Anna sat together on the porch. The moon hung low, bathing everything in silver light. Michael turned to her, his voice steady. "You know," he said, "for a long time I thought my story began with abandonment. But now I realize it begins with survival, with love I didn't recognize at first. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but you did what you thought would save me, and it did. I survived. I lived. And now I forgive you. Mom. Tears streamed down Anna's face, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. She reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's all I ever hoped for." The silence that followed was peaceful, like the closing of a long and difficult chapter. They didn't need more words. The bond had been restored not by erasing the past, but by choosing to move forward together. That night, Michael no longer saw himself as abandoned. He saw himself as chosen twice, once by his adoptive parents who gave him a loving home, and again by his mother who returned to face the hardest truth of her life. Both choices, though painful in different ways, were born of love. Theirs was not a perfect story, but it was real, was proof that even in the face of regret and loss, redemption is possible. Sometimes the people we think we've lost forever find their way back to us. Sometimes forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about allowing love to be stronger than pain. As Michael leaned against his mother's shoulder that night, he realized something profound. Life's greatest miracles often come disguised as second chances, and for the first time. Both mother and son believed in miracles again. If this story touched your heart, you are not alone. Each of us carries moments of pain, regret, or unanswered questions from the past. But stories like Michael and Anna's remind us that love can heal, forgiveness can rebuild, and even the deepest wounds can transform into something meaningful. At Real Moments, we believe that every story matters, especially the ones that show us the strength of the human spirit. That's why we share stories of family, love, redemption, and second chances. They are not just tales to pass the time. They are reminders that even in our darkest hours, hope is never truly gone. By subscribing to this channel, you're not just joining an audience, you're becoming part of a community that values compassion and understanding. Each video we share is meant to inspire, to spark reflection, and to remind you that behind every face you pass on the street, there may be a story as powerful as this one. So, if you believe in forgiveness, if you believe in second chances, if you believe that love is stronger than pain, then this is the place for you. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell. Share this story with someone who might need a little reminder that healing is possible. Your support helps us continue to bring these real, emotional stories to life stories that might just change someone's perspective or even their life. Because, in the end, what binds us together are not our differences, but the moments of truth and love we all share. Join us here at Real Moments, where every story is a chance to believe again.